Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump and Zelenskyy meet in Florida, making progress on Ukraine peace, but key issues do remain. Trump and Netanyahu are set to meet today at Mar-a-Lago to push forward a stalled Gaza ceasefire plan. And Thailand and Cambodia sign a China-brokered deal to restore trust and uphold a border ceasefire. Donald Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy say progress has been made towards ending the war in Ukraine after talks in Florida. Both leaders described the discussions as positive, though Trump warned key issues remain unresolved. Zelenskyy says most of the peace plan is taking shape, with further talks expected next week. This comes as Russia claims that Ukraine tried to attack President Vladimir Putin's residence, warning that Moscow's negotiating stance could indeed change. For more on this, I'm joined from Kyiv by John Kavulich, a senior editor for outcome modelling analysis at Issue Insight. John, as always, great to have you on the show. I just want to start with some news we've been getting in the last hour or so, that Russia says Ukraine tried to attack Putin's residence, so Moscow's negotiating stance will indeed change. Is this a massive blow for President Trump and the ongoing talks?
No, because it continues, that elasticity challenge that Ukraine has, and that is that Russia's always been willing to target civilian infrastructure and target non-military assets. And Ukraine has been challenged to match that, basically because its people won't allow it and the countries supporting Ukraine won't allow it. So sending a drone or a missile or a rocket near one of President Putin's homes, the Russians are going to feign outrage, and this is a terrorist attack, and it must be stopped, et cetera, et cetera. But it's more performative in terms of their response than it is substantive.
And let's get back to those talks, because Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy say they made a lot of progress. But John, what has actually been achieved after a long afternoon of talks in Florida? It's sort of, what are the nuts and bolts?
Yeah, to continue your analogy, there are nuts and bolts at the table, but they're not connected with one another. So you got a lot of bolts sitting around, you got a lot of nuts sitting around, but none of them have been connected. And, you have the words positive, productive. And when I continue to hear 90%, so let's look at that I didn't do really well in math in school, but let's look at that from a mathematician's perspective. You have 20 points, and they're saying 19 of them are agreed to. That means 18 of 20 are agreed to. What we know is that there are 3 that are not agreed to. One is territory, the other is security guarantees, and the third is reparations. So and those are the most important of those 20. And so if you weigh them, if you use a weighted calculation, clearly the resolving issues relating to territory are far more important than is the Russian language being included or an investment fund being established. So when you start to really deconstruct the 20, and you weigh those 3 that are still outstanding, it's not 90%. It's maybe they're 10% there because they've only agreed on the easy ones. And of course, Russia hasn't had its say yet. But the 3 that are the biggest, the most important, this is a real estate play. And Russia is saying, we want this real estate. And so, we're a long way away, a long, long way away.
And it's really interesting because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the details, which, of course, you said you feel we're a long way away. But the details have been vague on two key issues, security guarantees and territory. Did we get any answers on those sticking points from Zelenskyy or Donald Trump yesterday?
Both heads of state have spun that they have gotten something. But we saw when President Zelenskyy arrived at Mar-a-Lago, their first interaction with the media, was 95%, 90%. We've made progress. We've been productive. We've got this. We've got that. Zelenskyy, wants 40, 50 years of security guarantees. President Trump says, 15. And so you've got, just this incredible distance between what President Zelenskyy is saying he wants and what President Trump is willing to give. And it's, it potentially, is it surmountable? Yes, but quite likely, this is going to take a long time to, from where it is now, which is an elastic band pulled all the way, to try to, get some more elasticity into it.
And, President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are set to hold another phone call very soon. But I'd be interested to know what you thought of Putin phoning Donald Trump yesterday, almost picking up the phone after Zelenskyy had come to the White House.
President Putin is very smart in terms of knowing that the last voice that President Trump hears is generally going to be the voice that he remembers. And so if President Putin speaks to President Trump before President Trump meets with President Zelenskyy, before President Trump meets with members of the European Union, before President Trump meets with members of NATO, what is in President Trump's head is President Putin saying, yes, Donald, we're open to that. Yes, we're open to have maybe another meeting to move forward with that. Yes, we can discuss that. Yes, that's interesting too. And so President Trump, being the deal maker, the optimist, the wanting to get it all together, President Zelenskyy rolls in. And President Zelenskyy is trying to say, wait a minute, the reality check. And President Trump doesn't want to hear reality check. President Trump doesn't want to hear somebody come in and tell him that it's not going to work. He can't do it, that President Putin's lying. President Putin's playing him. It's just a huge mistake. And so President Putin was smart. President Trump obviously wanted to have something before the meeting yesterday so he could say, well, I just spoke to Putin, so I have an idea of what he'll accept. And then they've just spoken now where President Trump can say, this is what we talked about. And President Putin can say, well, Donald, those are interesting. Maybe we should have a meeting, but et cetera, et cetera. So again, a lot of performativeness, a lot of for the optics, for the cameras, and very, very smart by President Putin.
Yeah, shrewd negotiator is Vladimir Putin. But, John, this might be $1 million question for you. But what actually happens next?
We're going to see, they discussed that there's going to be a meeting of European Union leaders and, well, actually, let me rephrase that. A coalition of the willing will probably travel again to Washington, travel again to the White House. So we'll see another one of these meetings where the EU leaders sit around the table. It's sort of a North Korea dear leader type of thing, because they're not there because of Ukraine. They're there because of the trade deals that President Trump is negotiating with the European Union that they're all subject to. So, they know that if they turn down the invitation, that's a strike against them. He remembers it, and he takes numbers, and he's going to extract something. So they show up, and then on Ukraine, it's very challenging for them to sit in a room with him and say, Donald, you're wrong. Donald, Putin lied to you. Donald this, Donald that. So we're going to see this meeting. The Europeans are saying that President Macron is saying he's going to host a meeting next week in Europe. And then eventually, they'll continue discussing and they'll have some sort of meeting. I do, though, think that this meeting in Mar-a-Lago may have been a mistake for President Zelenskyy. And I know he had some people within his team that were saying maybe not a good idea, because if you make this all about Donald Trump, then it's going to be all about Donald Trump, as opposed to trying to stretch and include the European Union. And as we've had President Macron of France say, that maybe we need to talk to President Putin, maybe we need to have a meeting with President Putin. So all of this is going to be mixed up during the next 30 days or so.
John Kavulich, very interesting. Thank you, as ever, for your insights and for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, US President Donald Trump is set to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. The meeting aims to revive a US-brokered ceasefire in Gaza, which is facing delays before a more complicated second phase. Trump plans to push his 20-point plan for Gaza and the region, while Netanyahu stresses ongoing security concerns. For more on this, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by Lianne Pollak-David, co-founder of the Israeli Coalition for Regional Security. Lianne, brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you for your time today. Trump and Netanyahu are preparing to meet as differences over Gaza grow. What will be the main focus of the talks today between the two leaders?
Well, mainly, how do we actually deal with the fact that two of the prerequisites of moving on to the next phase have not been met? So first of all, we still have a dead hostage that has yet to be released, an Israeli hostage. We are now 80 days into the ceasefire, and no traces of this hostage to return home. And the second is that there currently is no real concrete plan on how Hamas is actually going to dismantle, and Hamas themselves are not really keen to do it. And so the diplomatic pressure is not showing any results, but also we're not seeing any regional forces that are now inclined to come in and go head to head with Hamas and dismantle and do the dirty job themselves. This is really one of the major issues that is going to be discussed. But beyond that, there's also a discussion on the constellation of the international stabilization forces. Israel completely rejects, for example, the presence of Turkish troops on Gazan ground, and rightfully so. Turkey, unfortunately, in the recent years has become extremely hostile to Israel, has become a major supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood and of Hamas. And so getting Turkish troops to fight Hamas doesn't look like a really good idea, or does not look like an idea that would provide the citizens of Gaza an opportunity for change, let alone answer the security considerations of Israel. So this is another thing that will be discussed today.
And Lianne, according to reports, the US administration is actually running out of patience over the Gaza ceasefire, and there are fears Netanyahu could resume fighting with Hamas. We've seen the ceasefire being broken several times from Israeli side. Is it time for President Donald Trump to now put more pressure on Netanyahu to get to the second phase of the ceasefire? Because, like I said, there are serious concerns that he is stalling.
Well, look, we've discussed this many times, but the IDF is really working under very difficult terms and in an environment where Hamas uses its own people as human shields. So it's really, really hard to maneuver around this environment. And Hamas itself basically violated the ceasefire endless amount of times, including what I just said, not releasing the last hostage, Israeli hostage remaining. We're 80 days into the ceasefire now.
And Lianne, sorry, Lianne.
But really what we need, Lianne, right now is we need all of those regional moderate players that signed up to the Trump plan, Israel included, to do their part. So as long as the International Stabilization Force is not into play, every single day that this happens remains a vacuum, and that means that Hamas regains control over its population, over the Gazan population, which is of course counterproductive. So the pressure by President Trump is necessary, perhaps even on Netanyahu himself, but on all of the regional players to really put their skin in the game and to implement what they have signed up for.
So, Lianne, let's just move on a little bit so we don't get stuck in that conversation on tit for tat when it comes to violating the ceasefire, because obviously we've spoken about it many times and it can be a very contentious issue. But this meeting comes amid fears Israel will launch new offences against Hezbollah in Lebanon or against Iran. Are the fears of Israel destabilising the Middle East warranted at the moment from the international community, do you think?
Look, I think that Israel's military achievements were necessary, and those are the ones that brought about the change that we're seeing now, the new opportunity for Gaza, the new opportunity for Lebanon, the new opportunity for Syria, and even potentially a new opportunity for a new chapter in Iran. So this is due to Israel's military activity. But I do believe that it's now time to translate these phenomenal military achievements into diplomatic alliances, diplomatic arrangements, new agreements across the region. We have a region to rebuild, to stabilize, and Israel needs to be a completely constructive and positive player in that sense. Bearing in mind, though, that still we have Hezbollah that has not disarmed, we have Hamas that is not disarmed, we have Iran that is intensifying its ballistic missile program, and its nuclear program was just stalled, will not completely eradicated. So those are all threats that are not just for Israel, but for the entire region, and we all need to work together in a constructive manner to make that happen. I can tell you that I, as the co-founder of the coalition, the Israeli Coalition for Regional Security, along with another 120 top figures from the Israeli society, are pushing for this direction internally. And we believe that the Israeli government should be a constructive partner in this space, but we also need all the moderate regional players to work with us to make that happen and to not be blind to the regional threats that are still there. We need to provide actual concrete solutions on how to disarm these destabilizing groups and how to deal with Iran and make sure that its proxy system is not being rebuilt.
And it's really interesting because we talk about regional stability there, Lianne. And do you think when Netanyahu goes to the White House, this is something he's going to be talking to Donald Trump about? Because obviously we saw when Iran was attacked, the US did come in and help Israel in that moment to eradicate the nuclear facilities. Do you think that Netanyahu will be pushing for this again?
I think that Netanyahu will be pushing for the fact that another attack should be on the table. Iran has to be deterred. Deterrence only happens when there's a real military option on the table. So I think that will be part of the discussion, having a concrete option, military option on the table with the backing and even the participation of the US. But we all understand that this is not the solution. This is not a policy, is just a tool. What we truly need is we need Iran to be isolated, weakened, and basically for its nuclear program and its ballistic missile program to be under control and eradicated. And this is what we need. How are we going to achieve that? Obviously through an agreement, and we need to push, include all the necessary means possible in order to push Iran for that, for Iran to agree to that. And now is the best time of all because Iran is more isolated than ever before. Its proxy system is not eradicated, but is very weakened. Iran really needs to change its course. So I hope that this will be the direction that President Trump will be taking. Again, one of the tools has to be that a military option a concrete one is on the table. It's simply part of deterrence.
Lianne Pollak-David, thank you so much for joining you. Good to have you on the show. For joining us, apologies. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. A train derailment in Mexico has killed at least 13 people and injured nearly 100. Images from the site show rescuers helping passengers from a train that is partially tilted over the side of a cliff. Now, at least 16 people have died in a nursing home fire in Indonesia that broke out on Sunday night. Many of the victims were found inside their rooms at the retirement home. Authorities say an investigation is now underway. Famed French actress Brigitte Bardot has died at the age of 91. She retired from acting at 39 to focus on animal rights activism. In recent years, Bardot also attracted controversy for her remarks on immigration. And finally, Kosovo's ruling party has won the election after months of political deadlock, marking the third term for its leader, Albin Kurti. The Albanian nationalist won in February, but without a majority, Kosovo has since been without a functioning government. Now to Taiwan, where China has launched its largest military exercises around the island to date. Dubbed a Justice Mission 2025, the drills include live fire operations and are said to simulate attacks on both land and sea targets. The show of force comes amid Beijing's intensifying pressure on the self-ruled island in recent years. Lianne David has the details.
Ships, live fire, and rockets. China's Eastern Theater Command has today announced 2 days of military drills surrounding Taiwan.
As frontline officers and soldiers, we're confident and capable of addressing any acts of sabotage and provocation, and infringements or disruptions. We will safeguard regional security and stability, uphold national sovereignty and interests, and protect the territorial integrity of our motherland.
Beijing labels the exercises a stern warning against Taiwanese independence. They blame Taipei's current ruling Democratic Progressive Party of engaging in separatism.
I want to emphasize once again that China's determination to safeguard national sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity is unwavering. Any foul acts of crossing the line and provoking on the Taiwan issue will inevitably be met with China's resolute countermeasures.
China claims sovereignty over the island, but Taipei rejects the claim, saying that only the Taiwanese can decide the island's fate. The latest drills align with Beijing's rising military and diplomatic pressure on the democracy, and are the 6th major military exercise held in recent years. Taiwan has placed its forces on alert, referring to Beijing as a destroyer of peace.
We call on the Chinese authorities to act rationally and with self-restraint, to immediately cease irresponsible provocative behavior and not to misjudge the situation and become a troublemaker undermining regional peace. Our government will also continue to closely cooperate with all parties in the region to jointly protect the rules-based international order and safeguard peace, stability and security in the Indo-Pacific.
China accuses so-called external forces of arming Taipei and encouraging Taiwanese independence. The drill will continue into a second day, across 7 zones closer than ever before to the island. Leigh-Ann David, Arabiya English.
Thailand and Cambodia have signed a China-brokered peace deal in hopes to maintain a ceasefire after weeks of deadly border clashes. The fighting killed over 100 people and displaced more than 500,000. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington by Mark Fitzpatrick, Associate Fellow, International Institute for Strategic Studies. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleased to be here.
Great to have you. So top diplomats of China, Cambodia and Thailand have been holding talks today following the signing of that ceasefire agreement. But Mark, the US is notably absent. How significant is this meeting?
Well, I think you hit on the most significant part of it, that this was a China-brokered ceasefire. The United States was not involved in that, although President Trump mentioned it and took credit for it yesterday. But he was the one who brokered the October ceasefire, which then broke down, and now China has stepped in and another ceasefire, and I don't know how long it'll last. It's probably pretty fragile still.
And like you said to me, in October, President Donald Trump claimed credit for ending the fighting between Cambodia and Thailand. But my big question to you is, why did this agreement break down? Why didn't it hold?
Yeah, this agreement broke down because it didn't address the fundamental problem. The problem is that there was a vague border based on old French maps from a century ago, and the exact border was never clearly defined. You have nationalism in both Thailand and Cambodia, and people and governments that don't want to cede any of what they regard as their territory. So they repeatedly clash over it. And you can have ceasefire agreements to call for no more firing, but if you don't agree on where the actual border is, demarcate it and mark it out. This is going to happen again.
Like you said, this could happen again. That leads me on to my next question, Mark. Talks in China are focused on step-by-step measures to restore relations, among other things. What do you make of this China-brokered ceasefire? Do you think it could be more durable? Or what needs to be put in place to stop this from happening time and time again?
Yeah, I don't know why it would be more durable than the earlier one that broke down, except that maybe Chinese involvement will make the parties more reluctant to be firing. But China, even though China regards this as its sphere of influence, it doesn't have much of a security role in Southeast Asia. It doesn't have troops in Thailand or Cambodia. It has a lot of influence in Cambodia, but the United States is the one that has had troops in Thailand. So if the United States, with its heavy security footprint, couldn't keep the peace, I don't think China necessarily will. And so what do they have to do? As I said, they have to demarcate the border and come to a firm agreement and put up signs and so forth and shake hands on that.
And it's really interesting because we're talking about China brokering the ceasefire deal, Mark, and the US being notably absent. What does that say about China on the world stage and its power?
Yeah, I saw this and I thought, gosh, this is symbolic of what's happening globally today, that China's influence is rising, and that of the United States is decreasing. Under the Trump administration, the United States has become more isolationist, focusing primarily on its own hemisphere. Getting rid of its soft power, Voice of America, pulling ambassadors out of 30 countries. And so China is taking advantage of America's retreat. And this little ceasefire agreement between Cambodia and Thailand is not that big of a deal, but I think it is symbolic of that shifting balance between the superpowers.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because there's been so much talk about that, especially because of US aid that has been cut too, and who's coming to the rescue of that in various countries. But Mark, Cambodia and Thailand are both members of ASEAN. Could we see the regional group taking a lead in ending this conflict or steering things a little bit?
Well, yes, Leanne, that would be ideal, that the regional organization to which both Cambodia and Thailand belong would step up and exert influence and bring the parties together. That should be what ASEAN does. But ASEAN has never been very willing or able to do things like that in the security sphere. ASEAN is mostly focused on economic cooperation. And they can't bang heads together in the security sphere because they operate on a consensus basis. And if one of the parties doesn't agree, well, they can't do anything.
And just a quick thought, I was thinking about this recently, Thailand is such a popular place for tourism, especially at this time of year. In the past, I've spent time in Thailand and many people go there for New Year's Eve and Christmas. What impact is this having on Thailand and Cambodia as the world watches what happens?
Yeah, isn't Thailand a nice place to visit?
Yeah.
Well, what's happening on the border is not going to impact tourism. I mean, unless, people get scared. But there's no reason for them to get scared because none of this border skirmishing goes very deep into either country. It's all very localized. There were other developments in Thailand over the past few years, the internal political trouble, the coup d'etats and so forth that you would have thought might have more impact on tourism, but hasn't really, because Thailand remains such a vibrant, culturally rich country and on everybody's travel itinerary. Cambodia should be on people's travel itinerary. Angkor Wat is just fantastic, but it doesn't have the infrastructure to accommodate many tourists. And I think over the years, if Cambodia were to play its cards right and get external help, it could develop more as a tourist destination. But having fights on its borders probably doesn't help that goal.
Mark Fitzpatrick, absolutely brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to talk with Arabiya English.
Thank you so much, Mark. Let's take a look at the top business news now. Precious metals pulled back Monday after hitting record highs last week. Gold eased from near all-time levels and silver fell below $80, easing tensions, including progress in US-Ukraine peace talks, also weighed on demand. Both metals have still seen huge gains this year, with silver up 181% and gold is up 72%. Now, global stocks are on track to finish 2025 at record highs, driven by investor optimism over potential US interest rate cuts next year. The dollar hovered near its lowest level in almost 3 months, reflecting expectations of a looser monetary policy. Let's go to the sports news now. And in tennis, the much talked about Battle of the Sexes exhibition has ended in straight sets win for Nick Kyrgios. The former Wimbledon finalist beat women's world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka 6-3, 6-3, and that was right here in Dubai on Sunday. Sabalenka was on the losing end of the high-profile matchup, while Kyrgios walked away with the win in the off-season exhibition. I went to watch it, and it was absolutely brilliant. Now, Cristiano Ronaldo says his football career won't end until he reaches 1,000 goals. The Portugal captain is now on 956 goals after scoring twice for Al Nassr in the Saudi Pro League. The 40-year-old says his motivation remains high as he chases that very historic milestone. Now, British heavyweight boxer Anthony Joshua has been injured in a car crash in Nigeria. Nigerian police say Joshua sustained minor injuries, but 2 others reportedly died in that accident. The 36-year-old was taken to a hospital along with other injured passengers. Myanmar is set to hold its first general election since its military seized power in a coup 5 years ago. Voting will be held in different parts of the country in 3 phases, with the second and third phases taking place in January. Critics say the vote won't restore the country's democracy nor end its devastating civil war. Patrick Falk has this report.
Calm in Yangon as Myanmar prepares to go to the polls this weekend, even as a civil war rages across swathes of the Southeast Asian nation. Ballots will be cast in 102 of the country's 330 townships, with further rounds due next month. There'll be no voting in 65 townships because of ongoing conflict with ethnic guerrilla groups and resistance forces. Still, the junta government says the election will return Myanmar to a multi-party democracy and bring power back to the people.
In the last couple of years, we have seen the decline of the military junta, the decline in military strength from the Burmese side. They're not 100% weak yet, but I think that this election is a sign that to continue with the civil war like it has always been in the last 4 or 5 years, it's very tough and it's really tiring for the Myanmar military.
The last time an election took place in Myanmar was in 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was annulled by the junta after military generals accused Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy of electoral fraud following its landslide victory. Suu Kyi and many of her party members were detained along with thousands of junta opponents. Critics say the upcoming vote will be neither free nor fair and that power is likely to remain in the hands of military leader Min Aung Hlaing.
The junta's election is designed to prolong the military's power of slavery over people. The military generals are surviving in wealth with impunity to their crimes against the people and ethnic minority groups in the past. So, Min Aung Hlaing and the junta members intend to have their election to save themselves from the crimes they've committed. Their election can be assumed as not only fake and fraud, but it's also a blood-stained scheme. That's why we don't accept it.
Meanwhile, fighting in the country has intensified over the past year. One international monitor showed military air and drone strikes have increased by about 30% compared to the year before. Schools and medical facilities have been hit in near daily strikes. This month, dozens were killed in a strike on a hospital in opposition-controlled Rakhine State. The junta insists the polls have popular support. Spokesperson Zaw Min Tun said the election is being conducted for the people of Myanmar, not for the international community. Experts say many fear the election will only entrench the power of those responsible for a war that's claimed thousands of lives. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya English.
Now, British heavyweight boxer Anthony Joshua has been injured in a car crash in Nigeria. Nigerian police say Joshua sustained minor injuries, but 2 others reportedly died in the accident. The 36-year-old was taken to a hospital along with other injured passengers. For more on this, I'm joined by sports journalist Chris Skudder. Chris, great to have you on the show. So, terrible news coming out of Nigeria today. What more do we know about Anthony Joshua's injuries following this car crash?
Well, all we know at the moment, the police have said that he is, quote, fine. Minor injuries. I've seen the pictures, as I'm sure you have. What we believe happened was a Lexus Jeep was traveling from the capital Lagos to a town called Sagamu, which is where Joshua has relatives. Of course, he fought 10 days ago in Miami, and he was heading home to Nigeria, where he was brought up. Well, he went to boarding school anyway for the new year. We believe there were 5 people in the car, and the police at the moment are saying they believe an overtaking maneuver was made by the car at high speed. It crashed into a stationary lorry, and sadly there were 2 fatalities after that. Joshua was in the back seat. We believe that the fatalities were in the front seat of the vehicle. We don't yet know who those people were, but Joshua, the impact was very large on the front of the car, as you might imagine. In the back, it seemed to be intact. He was taken out by police and was sitting upright when he was taken away from the scene. Pictures of him looking in great discomfort, but according to police anyway, they are minor injuries and he is fine. But the family are saying that they are shocked by what's happened. And there was a brief statement, we're hoping for his speedy recovery, they say, and also the people who sadly passed away.
Yeah, Chris, we're seeing those pictures on our screen right now and can see the impact that that car actually took during that accident and the front of the car. And as you say, Joshua was in the back. But Chris, you did mention to me this news comes just 1 week after Joshua, of course, went head-to-head with Jake Paul in that big fight. How much of a shock do you think this will be for the sporting world and the fact that Joshua did take a hiatus and appears to be having some sort of comeback plan?
Yeah, he's 36 now. I mean, Joshua's career really was ruined when he was beaten by Andy Ruiz some years ago. A huge shock in the heavyweight world. He was the golden boy, really unbeaten. Lost to Andy Ruiz and has since lost 3 times, twice to the great Ukrainian Alexander Usyk and once to Britain's Daniel Dubois. And that set him back hugely. And that's why he had to fight, really, this nonsense fight against the YouTuber Jake Paul, which he won very comfortably, as you'd expect, really, for a pro fighter against a novice. But he's coming back. The British public want to see the 2 great stars of the heavyweight era from Britain, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, fight in 2026. That's been widely mooted. It probably won't happen until the end of this year. But of course, at this stage, we don't know how this accident will impact on him, not just physically, but emotionally as well. He was with friends in that car. There was a video circulating of him playing table tennis with a partner earlier that day, we understand. So it'll leave deep scars, obviously. But that is a big fight that is waiting to happen in the heavyweight ranks in 2026. Tyson Fury, former heavyweight champion, against the twice world heavyweight champion himself, Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, Chris, I'm sure we'll find out more about who the people were in that car with Anthony Joshua as the days go on. But Chris Skudder there, thank you so much for joining us and telling us more on that car accident that Anthony Joshua was involved in Nigeria. Appreciate it. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. And we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.